Live! Hey everybody, my name is Shamananda, and I am here with Mr. John Atkinson. Say hello, John!
Hey everyone, how's it going? Happy to be back for episode 5. We got an incredible episode for you, all about self love and self care. And we're excited to share and discuss what that means to us and how we can support you as well.
Yeah, what does it mean to you, John?
Self love, I think, is unconditionally loving yourself no matter what without self judgment. I know for my journey, it's taken a while with just my sporting background. I was always more judgmental than I thought I was, just because with my high sporting background, it was always the obsession to do really, really well and to be better every single day. And that takes a toll on you for sure. And over the years, just having that ingrained in my mind. And then when I stopped playing, that pivoted to the work life. So out into my 9 to 5, I always wanted to be the best, and I would be judgmental of other people because I thought, hey, if I'm trying to be the best I am, where's their self love to be the best? So I think just meeting myself where I'm at with the growth, and then also working with you, Guru, is where as I pivot, meeting myself where I'm at, coming from a neutral lens and just really pouring into who I'm becoming and not really, attaching myself to my old programs or old ways and just being in the moment. So I think a lot of self love and self care is really being in the moment because we have so many distractions around us, so much forward thinking, so many things in the past that bring us down or hold us back. And so that's my somewhat definition. I don't like to say like definitions because sometimes it's evolving, it's changing through benchmarks and pivots of the work we do daily.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think a lot of people, as far as self care is concerned, it's something that they might avoid depending on what kind of lifestyle that they have. As an example, if you're really trying to get ahead in business, a lot of the time you're going to ignore certain things like you won't have time for certain things, such as making sure that you're getting adequate rest, even, or doing the things that you enjoy, doing the things that make you happy, reading a book, simple pleasures, things of leisure. Because a lot of people out there right now are hitting the pavement so hard that they don't really they're not really doing the things that make them happy. And I talk to a lot of people that way, that they don't, they'll say, well, this is my self-care time when they see me. And well, what do you do outside of here, though? If you only see me one day a week, if your self-care is only seeing me, what else are you doing for yourself? This isn't enough. I mean, it's great. It's a great start, but the person you came for self-care is telling you you get to have self-care every day. You get to love yourself every single day. How are you going to do that? Now, that doesn't mean that it's best for you to roll around in bed and just, play on your phone or, eat bonbons or whatever you're going to do, get a bunch of pizza. I mean, that's not what I mean by self-care, and for everyone, self-care is going to look a little bit different. So, John, what's your self-care? Like, what do you do when you provide self-care for yourself?
hmm I liked how you hit on like the adequate sleep. That's one of my things recently that I've been looking at is making sure I'm getting adequate sleep. But when it comes to self care, is actually having a disconnect day or also disconnect time. For the longest time, I was just go, go, go. And exactly what you said. I liked how you say people hit that pavement and they're just on go mode. And we don't really disconnect from our routines or things that, like you said perfectly, is that we're not happy about. So my main thing is when I have a so-called day off is I get to choose when to disconnect. Like if I want to, I can work 7 days a week if I want to. I work a 9 to 5 and I own my own business, but do I want to do that? Not necessarily. So I at least have one disconnect each day. Typically, they're on Thursdays, and I disconnect by going. I look at it too. If you guys have tuned into our old episodes, is the four bodies guru. So what's going to fill my cup up physically? So physically, it's what I'm eating, what I'm hydrating with, what I love going and working out. Lately, I've been loving my self care routine, running down to the beach. I have this one trail that always calls me, and I run that, and it's just a beautiful thing just to be out in nature and run, and that's a huge part of my self care routine. And then the mental and emotional, so that really comes down to my daily practice. But also when I have a disconnect day, I have longer meditations, longer time with myself to disconnect, be in my quietness, be in the presence of God, and also just have my alone time. I deal a lot with the collective daily, whether it's at my 9 to 5 or in my own business, and it could be draining at times. So I really I'm obsessed with my quiet time. Like if someone said, "Hey, you don't have to talk to anybody for a week," I would be fine with that. And a lot of people aren't. So I've had to come up with ways to be able to disconnect. So with the emotional bodies and mental is the meditation part for me on my disconnect is longer, or also just walks by myself and meditating. You actually gave me a homework assignment one time is like a walking meditation, walking affirmations, all of that into around where I live. And then the spiritual embodies all of that. So I think what I think of my self-care is like, how do we rest? What does that look like? And you said it well too, is like sometimes it's just vegging out on the couch. I don't even watch a lot of TV. Sometimes it's the TV's off and I'm not even on my phone and I'm just like being, like just on I call it the resting slab and just kind of like resting because we don't really rest. I think like you shared, a lot of people, if they're coming in as your clients saying, "Hey, I'm go, go, go," they might have family, might have kids. Um, it's really creating a routine. So, part of that self love for me is creating a routine. Yeah, I could disconnect Thursday, but I could also disconnect on other days as well. So, it's really making that choice of if you want to disconnect. Some people don't want to disconnect, and that's where you said it great, is they hit the pavement and then they wonder why all these things are happening to them. Challenges are coming up. Well, they don't even have their own alone time to just hear their own thoughts. We're distracted like crazy with music, with TV, with our jobs, with other people, with text messages, emails. And self love for me is just getting all that out, pushing all that away from me, and just letting me be in my thoughts.
Absolutely. So, really important points. And I would say one of the more important points that you mentioned, I mean, you said some really great things, but one of the more important points that you mentioned is how do you find your self care in the four bodies? Because each of your bodies require a level of self care. So when people go out in the world and they think, okay, self care, I'm gonna go get a massage. Okay, but how is that serving all of the bodies? Is that all you're doing? How are you serving your self care on all four bodies? So you get to look at the physical, the mental, emotional, and spiritual. And if you're doing that, you're going to have very well rounded self care. But not a lot of people will think of the world in this way. But if you do, you're going to feel a satisfaction in your self care routine. And if it's about time, so let's say you're one of those people that I mentioned earlier and don't have a lot of time to sacrifice because you're really trying to get ahead in business and you have 3 kids and you have a spouse who is, has needs, of course, and you get to provide those needs in your relationship. You get to find the time somehow to do these things. So if it has to do with a mental stimulation, maybe it's about whenever you're in the bathroom, instead of checking your messages on your phone, you're reading even a couple of paragraphs of a book. You know, just having it in the bathroom with you and just looking at it, maybe that's how you get to grab your time, you know? So if it has to do with your emotional state, maybe you take 10 seconds here, 20 seconds there to type out the different types of things that are rubbing you throughout the day. So that maybe the next time you have a minute while you're waiting for something, because most people do, they're on their phones, they send text messages. You look at what you wrote out and you go over it and begin to release those types of things from yourself. You find a way to forgive yourself for the situation. You find a way to forgive somebody else. You realize at least why these types of things are rubbing you, and do a little introspection. So even if it's in short bursts, even if you feel like, hey, I can't make this a part of my regular life and do it all the time, then at the very least begin by taking tiny chunks of time and beginning just to think about it, so that your unconscious mind can do some of the work for you and spit out information that might serve you later. So, and then of course the physical body, physical self-care could be anything from taking the right supplements, or exercising, or making sure you're putting the right water or foods into your body that support you as a person. Not everyone is gets to be fed the same way, but I can say that it's better to find a way to take the chemicals out of your routine, you know, and
Mhm.
generally speaking, universally, everyone is going to benefit more from something like that. But but yeah, so you get to formulate something that's going to work with all the four bodies. Does that make sense, John?
Yeah, I like how you painted that picture because it goes back to what you've brought up. I think was it episode one of the episode two in the tangibility of the four bodies. And I think how you brought up like how people say like, oh, I'm just gonna get a massage. It's even deeper than that because it goes beyond the physical. And a lot of times people don't think about that. And so I loved how you built that awareness for people tuning in as some of our choices, oh, we think it's a physical. Like when I go to the gym, I think, okay, it's a physical thing because it's tangible, but also it's a mental thing. Like, hey, I showed up for myself here. Emotionally, it could be getting out anger, maybe some sadness that's in my bodysuit, and it's that release too. So,
Mm.
and it's that spiritual connection of like, hey, I just want to be the best version of myself and seeing my own potential in myself as well. So that awareness is huge. I loved how you brought that up in the fact of tangibility of that word. I love that word. And that goes with the self care is like what's tangible, what can be measured. I always go off of never have the same week, right? So if you feel like you're in a slump or you're not getting that self care, is change things up. You highlighted like people have families, people have their things with their spouses or, all these jobs or their business is change up that routine if you feel like you're not getting that self-care and self-love because that's the most important thing to fill yourself up. That saying is fill yourself up first so you could serve others. And I always take that to heart because if I'm not at my best in my four bodies and everyone sometimes with ability until I was really aware of my four bodies, I was kind of like, okay, something's off. Like, I don't know what was off, but maybe it's in the spiritual. And then starting working with you, you highlighted that for me through different homework assignments and exercises. Like, hey, John, you're doing your disconnect. You're doing really well with your physical and maybe your mental side. Now double down on your spiritual practices more when you have that time. And that's always stuck with me. And I know people that come because I ask people, I'm like, hey, what's like I love learning from people too, Guru, and you see clients all the time and you're learning yourself as well. Is like what works for you. Like I liked how you said each person's schedule is different, each person's lifestyle, and it's cool to hear other people how they navigate their self-care and self-love routines And I know a lot of people that have been doubling down on their spiritual practices right from the time they get home from work to just get in a quiet place to do their little routine, and then maybe dinner's getting ready, and then they're reconnecting with their families, or maybe they're just live by themselves, and then they're in um, that physical body too, doing all of that. So it's all, like you highlighted, it's all connected. I think it's great just bringing that awareness to people viewing this live right now and later on. Is it's just the awareness of your four bodies. And it took me a while with my sporting background of really grasping that, because I like sports is such a included in those four bodies. It's, physical, mental, emotional, and then there's that spiritual aspect where we're all connected and we're all doing our thing. So, yeah, I love all those points, Guru. I wanted to ask you.
Oh, wait, hold up. Before you move on, I do have something else to say about it. Because there's a next level to that specific thing that we haven't talked about yet, which is when people come in and realize that they require self-care, they can feel that there's something inside of them that's missing, and they need something to support along the way. You get to identify which of the four bodies is in the most need of self-care as well. It's critical. So it's not just about, hey, let's have a well-rounded experience, which I mentioned earlier. That is important. Have a well-rounded experience for sure. But the money question here that you get to ask yourself is, which of my four bodies is the one that's lacking the most in self-care? Because chances are that's the secret sauce for you. So if there's something missing, so if you're completely ignoring your spirituality, that might be it. So if your physical body is in a lot of pain, that might be it. Where are you lacking the most? And definitely provide self-care in that arena. So, and also the other part of it is that your inner child might be might be bummed out that you're not giving them attention, and that might be the area that's going to give you the most benefit. So, are you starving your inner child? If so, are you going to create playtime for your inner child? And that might be something that's going to re-energize you. Or are you ignoring a very specific body that you have out of the four bodies? So the mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual. And if so, that's the area that really needs self-care. So you really got to pay attention to that and create something that's going to work for you. Anyway, I just wanted to add that before you moved on. Hope that's
I
okay.
love that. And I wanted to ask you, with that being said, what's the most common out of the four bodies I mean, obviously we're all at our different stages. What's the most common missing link that you see overall with your body of work with your clients on the four bodies? Like, which one stands out most that you're like, oh, wow, this is a kind of like a theme, I would say, for some of the clients coming in to see you? I guess just start with this year of who you've seen, because I mean each year is a little bit different.
Right. So it's really hard to say, but a lot of people ignore. So in the four bodies, the most common things to ignore is rest, sleep, and eating right. So that's absolutely something that people just completely forget how to do. They'll focus on other things. So in the spiritual body, a lot of people just have no idea how to connect with that part of themselves. It's funny because if you're coming to see somebody who's inclined spiritually, and you're trying to get spiritual help, and you go into their office, uh, you know, and they say that they don't even meditate, they don't do anything spiritually, but they just want spiritual support. What are they providing for themselves that's going to support them in their life? It's great to go and ask for help, and I would absolutely encourage that. But what's in the gap here is what are you doing for yourself in that department? These people a lot of the time aren't even meditating. There's nothing there. They're not connecting to that part of themselves. And for people, one of the deepest hungers One of the ways people are starved the most is through lack of spiritual connection with themselves, and connecting to that higher part of themselves and feeling that euphoria and peace and happiness that comes with that sense of completion. So if that's missing and you're finding that hunger and that sadness and that just like, oh, I just I'm feeling that ache inside of me and I don't know why, then chances are it's because you're not connecting to spirit. You're not connecting to that high part of yourself. So
Mm.
that comes down to self-love, because connecting to spirit is all about self-love. It really is, because that's what you are as spirit. Your love. So if you're missing that connection with self-love, chances are you're not connecting to your spirit at all, because that's what it is, right? So I would say, you asked what the biggest thing would have been. I would say, out of everything, that would be at its core. Everything else would be
Mhm.
a lesser vibration anyway, because we're dealing with lesser vibrational bodies. So if you think about the chakra system, if we're going from the root all the way up to the crown, as an example, the lower chakra systems deal with the lower, heavier energies. So, which is, just so we're dealing with the physical right at the root. Getting up towards the stomach, we're dealing with the emotional, and then mental, and then a combination thereof as you go up, and then we're going into the you know the spiritual at the top. The higher vibrational things are always going to be at the top. The higher
Mhm.
vibrational things in life has to do with spirituality. That's where the smartest part of yourself is, and that's where you should be focusing on. So at the core of it, if you're really, really getting to the meat of it, it has to do with not connecting with that part of yourself, because that's the highest vibrational part of yourself you have. So
Mhm.
that is the biggest problem always. But the lesser vibrational stuff, the physical stuff, the emotional stuff, the mental stuff, you know, going up the chain, are still really important. But keep in mind that the denser it is, the less higher vibrational it is, because it's denser, and that's totally cool. We need all the bodies. We need the
Mhm.
densest to the lightest. So the densest would be the physical, and then we have the mental and emotional. So mental would be next in line of being the densest, because it's just thoughts. And then emotional, we're getting a little lighter, because it could go either way. And then we're going into the spiritual. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
I might have
Mhm.
given you a little bit more than what you asked
No,
for.
I love that, and people tuning in, and it's very thorough for them to break that down, and I loved how you broke that down. There's um there's a saying, how we love ourselves is how we love everything. What are your views on that?
I agree with it. It's how we love ourselves. It projects outward naturally. So if we are critical of ourselves, we're going to be critical of everyone else. We're going to see it as a mirror reflected back at us at all times, coming from everything and everyone. So if we hate ourselves, we're going to see hate in other people. We're going to look for it, because that's all we see in ourselves. We know what we know, and then we're going to just apply that to everything else in the world. It's just how the mirror works. So, how we love ourselves, if we love ourselves unconditionally, we're able to love the world unconditionally. If we put a bunch of conditions on how we love ourselves and what we're allowed to be in order to be loved by us, which almost never happens, honestly, we're going to put the same conditions on the outside world with every single person that you meet, which is, it's
Mhm.
sad. It's sad. Uh, the world gets to
Mhm.
experience your unconditional love, and you get to experience it too, because it's very liberating. So why not choose it, really?
Mhm. Mhm. And that saying too is like, people's love speaks volumes for themselves. Even the aura, I think, even people's energy, you know how much self-love and self-care they've done based on the energy they bring in the room. And I feel like everyone could relate to that. This is when someone walks in, you could feel their energy, right? And you could feel that love for themselves, or just maybe they have good energy and they have good self love, and they're just off, and just feeling that energy, overall
Yeah.
on that front. I wanted to ask you, so with the soul and ego relationship, some of the time and most of the time, the ego gets in the way of our self-love through our stories, through our traumas, through what has happened, o overall in our life. Uh, how does someone get back on track loving themselves more when their ego has really interfered with their connection with self, or their ego is running the story rather than, their soul?
Wow. Well, and that's a really important question, actually. And it's funny because it's it's in alignment with the last video I just released on Valentine's Day, and I called it the shadow self because it has to do with um, that part of yourself. So the voice of the shadow really, for a lot of people, it's relentless. You know, there's this voice in your head that's telling you that you suck and that everyone else sucks. I mean, I'm being general. For everyone, it's going to be very specific and tailored. But when that happens, how do you shut it down? And how do you change your thought processes? And you know, if it's an untrained monkey in a kitchen throwing plates, how do you train your monkey so that it doesn't destroy you and doesn't destroy other people? And the shadow part of yourself will actually come out, or the ego, if you want to call it the ego, you can. It's the same. Uh, it would rather, and this is something that my guru always says, that your ego would uh, throw you under a bus if it meant its own survival, maintaining its own survival, so that it could continue to rule with an iron fist over your life. But the problem with your ego self is that it's a broken system. It's not built on uh, anything that's logical, because you created it when you were a child. You started creating the system when you were a child. Your entire neurological system that was built upon your own safety was created and established when you were a child. The intellect just isn't there when you're a kid. How are you supposed to keep maintaining those types of premises as you grow? And while it's true, as adults, we do grow up and we do change out a few belief systems. We have to. And we do learn. And a lot of the time we learn from trauma. We learn from pain, because that's going to create, you know, a new neurological synopsis so that we can actually move forward and, you know, create a new habit, I guess, so to speak. But going back to the ego versus the soul and, you know, who gets to be in charge, well, that's, you can only serve one master. You can't serve both at the same time. It's impossible. So you literally get to embark upon your life in a way where it's very mindful. Am I going to choose to be my soul? Am I going to choose that? Or am I going to choose this creation I made when I was a kid? Am I going to choose my ego and move forward in that way and let it throw fits and get angry and tell everyone that they suck? I mean, are you going to keep choosing that? Or are you going to allow yourself to surrender to the highest part of you and let that be in charge instead? So it's a battle. It's a fight, and it's a tug of war. And so who's going to win the tug of war? Well, it's really based on you and your choices. Are you going to continue to allow a broken system to run your programming in your head, or are you going to choose to have the smartest part of you be in charge so that everything in your life that you're meant to have and accomplish will come true? And that's really that's the bottom line when it comes to spirituality. Are you going to choose the highest part of you? And if you are, then there's going to be discomfort, probably, unless you completely surrender to the process. And if you surrender to the process, there's no pain or discomfort, regardless of situation or circumstances. You're just going to surrender to it, put your head down and go for it. And just let go of all of these things that cause you pain. But it's about being vulnerable. It's about allowing yourself to be alive. It's about being completely honest with yourself and everything that you're creating so that you can stand completely naked, so to speak, emotionally, and just let any feedback come, let and not worry about protecting yourself at every corner. So if you're running and hiding, if you're lying to yourself a little bit, or if you're making up stories to protect yourself in conversations, chances are you're not being 100% authentic and you're not actually choosing yourself as spirit. Because part of how you get to choose yourself as spirit is you get to be open and you get to be vulnerable and you get to be 100% honest no matter where you're at, and love yourself unconditionally exactly for where you're at, even if it's not perfect, because perfect in that way doesn't exist anyway. Perfection is only one thing, and that's how you create things, the thoughts and words and deeds, and how you feel about yourself, really. How you feel about yourself on the inside and how it's perfectly depicted in everything that you do. That is perfection. But perfection otherwise does not exist, because every single person out there has a different idea of what it means to be perfect. And you cannot please every single one of those people, because that will change by the minute depending on their mood. All right? So, anyway, bottom line, you asked me a question about spirit versus ego and how to choose, or why is there a battle? Because that's what human condition is. We will always battle it because we get to decide what's going to be in charge because of the way we were brought up. We were never trained or educated as children to learn how to love ourselves. And if we were, and don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's lots of parents out there that try to do that for their kids. I'm not saying that parents don't do that, but it's just when you're a baby, the very first thing you're doing is screaming for attention and saying, "Gimme, gimme, gimme, gimme." It's just a natural inclination for babies, and they have to do that to survive. So it's an instinct. It's an instinct for a reason, and it's totally okay. But we're wired for selfishness right from the get-go, for survival. And so getting out of that and changing our minds when we've been doing it for so long is very hard. Anyway, I've said a lot of things here. Now it's your turn to talk because my mouth needs to rest for a second.
So good, Guru. And I like the point of the ego versus the soul. And I think I want to hear your view on it too, is the collective consciousness on the fact of, is there a collective ego story going on in our world today?
A collective ego story. Oh my gosh. Yes. Sure. Yes. I would say there is, but I would need to be asked something a little bit more specific, because I could go off on a tangent on a bunch of little things here and there. But is there one that you have in mind?
Yeah. So with the collective ego, I would say, how do I want to put this? What is the main, like, we're at a certain point in our collective consciousness. And I think it goes back to what we were sharing earlier, how the ego could focus on the negative, and get into that story of negativity. Things aren't going well, and as we talk to more and more people out there, a lot of times people focus on the negative, the so-called good news. There's not a lot of good news that's promoted, whether it's from individuals or societies or countries that we live in. So I guess my question in terms of the collective ego is, why does the collective ego focus so much on the negative compared to the positive?
Okay, so who we are at the core of our being is love. And in order for us to truly understand who we are as love, we get to experience the opposite. And so by being on this planet and having the experience of all kinds of things, if you're love and you come to a planet where you can experience something else, because that's all you've experienced is love, right? A lot of people would be interested or attracted to the opposite, just to have that experience, to understand who they are as love better by having something opposing it. Because that's how we understand things here, right? In order for us to understand love, we get to understand hate. because otherwise it's just this feeling that we have all the time, right? If it was the only feeling. So in order for us to understand air, maybe we get to understand water. Hey, water is thicker. We can't breathe that in. It's like there's a difference. There's a comparison. Humans work on comparisons, but there is a creativity in the dark. There's a thrall. It's not comfortable to live in that space, to live in that negative space. But that's the point, right? It's negative. In order to feel happy and whole and complete, you're going to want to experience love and light, because that's the point of that. But experiencing negativity and hate and darkness can, for a lot of people, can be a bit of an addiction, or it was taught to them when they were a kid, and they never learned how to do anything else. They don't know there's a different way to think. They were trained by that by society. They were trained by that by their friends who are in a lot of pain, and they don't know any different. People rely on how to think, being taught how to think by what their surroundings are. So depending on who your parents are, or whoever raised you, or if you were raised by monkeys, I don't know. I mean, maybe the monkeys were really negative. It's hard to say. but so it's you're a product of your environment. So if those are the type of people that you're around, then that's what you're going to learn. But I find that by people have this tendency to want to choose to live as love when they're around, when they're presented with people that do it already. They naturally want to become that anyway, and they have a tendency to really hang on to it once they have it, because they know how good it feels. They know how much better they feel, how much easier life is. But if they don't know any different, then how are they going to make the change? They don't even know there's anything wrong with their brains. Not that there is, you know what I mean? But there's, it's not about right or wrong, but it is about what's going to feel better for that person in the, eventually. But because negativity never feels good, it just makes you feel sick. It does make you sick, literally.
Mm-hmm.
So,
With that being said, the power of affirmations in our self-love and our way of being, uh you that's a love language in itself, is how we give ourselves affirmations, how we give out affirmations to other people. A lot of times people label them as compliments, or positive feedback. What is your favorite affirmation to say, and also assign to your clients to practice, or to incorporate in their daily practices?
oh my gosh. Well, I don't have a favorite because I cater all of the mantras or affirmations for the client based upon their needs, and everyone has different needs. So that's really, it's not, it's not like I go to the mantra store and I say, this one's on sale, this one's good. It's not like that. It's not like that. It's you got to cater it to a person's needs, but and it's gonna be different for everyone. So, but I do like, there are a few that I like specifically, that really, because everyone has a problem with loving themselves. Almost most people, I would say 99% of people in my experience, have a problem with that. And so mantras such as I am the embodiment of unconditional love towards everything and everyone all of the time is really cool. And then another one that's really important, I think, is that people don't really understand that they're resourceful all of the time, that they're master manifestors all of the time, that they're either manifesting what they believe that they deserve. So if they believe they deserve nothing and that they're garbage, then they're going to keep manifesting that, and they're doing it masterfully. But some people don't really understand, especially if you're in that mindset. You just think that your life is garbage and that the world hates you. It's not really it. You actually believe that about yourself, and that's why you're manifesting that. But I would say the resources thing is really important because people have a tendency to give up and think that they don't have any way of getting what they want. So I like the mantra "All I need is within me now," because you're
Mhm.
absolutely whole and complete exactly as you are now. You're able to manifest anything that you want in the now as you are with doing nothing else but just by being you and being alive. That's it. So I
Mhm.
really like that one too. And yeah, I mean, it just as far as the rest of them, there's countless beautiful mantras and things that people can tell themselves that will really support. But while we're on the subject, I would say when it comes to mantra work, as an example, in my experience, that it's kind of like a scale. So if you tell yourself that you suck a lot, and it's that part of the scale might be really really heavy, and maybe your awesome is way up here because it's not very heavy, so that this scale is tilted this way. In order for you to actually start reprogramming your mind and get to a place where you feel like you're awesome, because you're a human program. That's about it. We reprogram ourselves all the time, and that's how we become successful. You get to tell yourself as many times as you told yourself you suck, that you're awesome. And so sometimes that takes a lot of focused mantra work. So people will use mala beads. I know people on a regular basis who every single day they'll do 10,000 mantras on a very specific thing to try to reprogram themselves. And it always works really, really well. Because you get to that point where the side is heavier. You got to catch up with the side that you've put weight on your entire life, you know. And the other thing about mantras is that in order to really make them highly effective, repetition is the key, but also you get to be doing something physical. So go for a walk, or do it while you're working out. Be on the treadmill, do something, but make sure your body is active and moving because it really does support with integrating the mantra inside of you. Passion really helps too. So and focus and really feeling and understanding what you're saying and allowing it to be a part of you. So don't just say it like nah, 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 actually feel something and it'll make a difference.
I love that. When it comes to giving affirmations or also getting an affirmation from someone, how important is it to fully receive that affirmation um, to self, and how does that relate to self love?
So how do you receive it when you say it to yourself, or how do you receive it when you get it from somebody else?
Yeah, so how you were saying about turning the tides, with the scale, how does someone, because I mean this was one of my challenges when I started working with you, is like I give a lot of affirmations, or I'm a positive person and my self-love outpours, but then when it sometimes comes back to me full tide, it's sometimes overwhelming to for my past versions of myself to fully receive an affirmation. So that could go on to how I'm receiving my affirmations that I'm doing for myself daily. And sometimes people, that's challenging, if they're trying to, scale it back a little bit, and then someone gives them an affirmation, it could be overwhelming for them. Or they could just brush it off how I used to. And I'm just like, oh, yeah, thanks, but not fully. Because when you fully receive an affirmation, it's a full bodily like experience of like feeling warm and feeling it in all four bodies of what you're trying to work towards, or maybe you've been behind the scenes really working on your self-love talk and your daily practices. So what would you say, how important is it to fully receive the affirmations that you're practicing on your own fully, and then once you're out there with the collective, because it's mirrored back, right? It's mirrored back to us if we're trying something or working on deprogramming ourselves, and then we go out in the world, that's going to come back to us mirrored through each other.
Okay, well, so if you're talking about being in a situation where somebody is giving you feedback that is about something you've been working on. So let's give an example so that it's not convoluted here. So let's say you have been feeling insecure about the work you've been doing, and your boss comes along and says, you know, I think you really did a great job today. I feel like the job you did was so good that I feel like I want to give you a raise. Uh, and I'm really grateful for everything, all the time and effort you put in. So let's say that was the affirmation that you're talking about. Um, so if you feel as though you are not that person, it's not going to be well received because your insecurity is already there. You might not feel like you're quite there yet. So if you're feeling a repulsion or a rejection of the affirmation, it's because you don't believe it's true. So, and if that's the case and you're working on it alone and you're doing your best to integrate that, then, you know, just understand that it's a work in progress. Recognize it as a, hey, obviously I don't believe it yet, but I'm working on it. And then double down on your mantras. You know, double down on a, yes, I do a great job when I'm at work. Yes, I do a great job. I'm a great worker. You know, people love me at work. I always do a perfect job. However your mantras are going to work for yourself. And that's it. So, but just be aware that if you're in a moment with somebody and they give you some sort of compliment and it goes against your own belief system, that's when you're going to feel that rejection. You're going to feel that, no, I don't believe you. And then you're going to feel that kind of like that pushback of, okay, and then you might feel uncomfortable. But so but there's stages of growth with that, and depending on where you're at, you're gonna have a different reaction. So just pay attention to it, engage it appropriately.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that because I think so many times people, and you could also add to it, Guru, is like clients that come to you that are in business leadership roles that have to give that feedback. And then sometimes when you give someone that feedback and you're like, this is the lens I see them. And then if, like you said, they don't see that, then sometimes that message isn't received as you thought it was going to be delivered. Like it's a positive thing. And does that go back to our focus as a collective so negative in our world? Like people always focus like maybe I'm not doing a good job, or like you said, it was beautifully in people when they're working in jobs and they're up for like a raise and you're giving feedback to someone. Sometimes it's not well received because they don't have that structure of their self-care or their affirmations, or maybe they're just still learning about themselves or the job at hand. Why is it sometimes not well received when they, I think you already touched on it though, is they don't see themselves as that, but how, if you're giving an affirmation, how can you reword it for them to fully receive that? Or is it just really off of how they view themselves?
Well, I think we need a specific case study really to answer it. But I would say if you're aware of somebody that has an insecurity, as an example. So if somebody we were doing the job example, we might as well continue with that. It's as good as anything. So if somebody is insecure about the job, the level of quality of job they're doing, maybe in the past they've had trauma with an old boss, or maybe just they had parents that were that they never thought they were good enough. You know, anything that they did, you would you would get to have a certain amount of discernment when you're giving this person feedback. So maybe if you don't know this person very well and you give the feedback of, hey, I think you really did a good job, and you can see that they were repelled, then an understanding that there's something in their belief system that didn't allow them to receive it is important. So, okay, so they don't believe they're that person. So how do you restructure that? How do you reword that so that they can hear you? Well, first of all, you should look at your own agenda and ask yourself why it's important for you for them to hear you. Because really, the feedback should be about them. So if they feel like they're not ready to receive it, then is it really something that you need to do? So you got to check in with yourself there and understand what your agenda is. Second of all, if it's something that you feel like it's important for whatever reason you've established, okay, this is not about me, but I think this would really help them, but still, is it really up to you? It's still going to be my question. But you could always do it very gently. Just say, if, it depends on how well you know them. So if you know them really well, then it's just a, hey, listen, I know that in the past maybe people have given you different feedback, but I think you're doing great. So touch the point that's really happening. You know, if it has to do with past feedback they got, and that's why they still feel like they're not doing a good job, then touch on that. Bring it up in a conversation and bring the unconscious to the front, which is what I do a lot with people. I'll bring the unconscious to the front so that it's right there, and they can't really. It's not doing push-ups in the background anymore. It's right in the front, if that makes sense. But without an example, it's hard to talk about, because there's so many different ways you can communicate with somebody so that they understand it, and there's so many different types of people in this world that get to be communicated with in a specific way, and you get to be flexible in how you deliver information with everyone so that they can hear you, and information will be well received. So, if that makes sense.
I love that, Guru. I wanted to end on the saying goes, we could only. Did we already touch on that? No, we didn't. So this is the last question we'll end on. Is the saying goes, we can only meet others at the depth that we meet ourselves. What does that mean to you? And is this true? I know we talked about like the self love, we could only love, but there is that saying where, you work on yourself and you just meet people where they're at, meeting others at the depth that they can meet their own selves. What does that mean to you? And is it true?
Oh, it's 100% true. Yeah. So I think we were talking a little bit about this before, but I'll extrapolate it a little bit more. So everyone is going to see the world exactly how they see it based on their own situation, circumstances, what they learned their entire lives, and what brought them to this point in time, right? So it's not going to be from your lens. It's not going to be from your cousin's lens or your neighbor's lens. It's going to be from their lens, and it's going to be very unique and formulated based upon everything they learned up until that point, all the decisions they made about what the information means. It's not something that we can truly dive in there and understand unless we lived that life and had all of those thoughts and experiences. I mean, we all struggle with our own thoughts and experiences and understanding who we are. We can't look at somebody else and kind of have that idea, just by looking at them, and just saying, okay, well, I think that's what it is for you. That's a judgment, and it should be removed, because it's not possible to do anything like that. So, I actually forgot your question because I started going on a tangent and my brain went 10 steps ahead of that. And I was thinking about those 10 steps and I thought, oh my God, I might actually be going away from his question. So, can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Of course. So the saying goes, we could only meet others at the depth that they can meet themselves.
That they can meet themselves.
And what does that mean for you? And then also, is it true?
Yeah. So the depth where they can meet themselves and they understand themselves. So if that's how they understand themselves, that's the projection that they're going to, put upon you and everything else that they see. And they're only going to see their mirror, reflected upon everything. So, I mean, upon you, upon their pets, upon, absolutely everything in the world. So that's the only way that's the only place people can come from, is based upon their own experiences and situations and circumstances. So if you don't work on improving your consciousness and releasing the limiting beliefs and getting rid of the trash, you're only ever going to see the trash. So that's where everyone will come from if they haven't worked on themselves. That's all they'll see. That's all they'll see reflected back. It's not possible to come from any other place. It's just not. So yeah, so yes, that's so it's 100% true. How could it be? How could they understand your situation or circumstances the way you lived your life? They can't. It'll never happen. So
Mhm.
yes, they can only come from, you know, their understanding of what life is. And there are
Mhm.
billions of people on this planet, and they all have a different way of looking at the world. And everyone is 100% right because they've lived a life and they've formulated an idea of what it means for them. And that is right, you know, regardless of, you know, the limiting beliefs, regardless of, you know, when consciousness is lacking or is really high. So it doesn't matter if they created a story about their life and they believe it. That's all that matters. So does it make it effective? Not necessarily, but everyone has a right to create whatever they want. And if it's in illusion or if it's in something else, then it's no one's business but theirs, really. So yeah,
Mhm.
they can only come from the place that they've learned in who they are, and bless them for that. You know,
Mhm.
it's great because if we continue to really listen to what everyone has to say, we're going to continue to share in that experience and expand upon our own, and then it's a shared experience as opposed to just, you know, just a mirror. So if people really learn how to be selfless in conversations and really learn how to listen, then that experience changes. But walking into somebody else's world, leaving all your stuff at the door is not something that most people are capable of doing. But if you can learn that art form, you really learn a lot about the world. And
Mhm.
maybe that formula would be different for you.
Mhm. Yeah, I think, the world's soul dehydration has to do with the lack of connection and also to how many times we hear like, "Oh, I can't connect with this person deeper," but then again, it really comes off what you're saying is how well can they connect with themselves, and what's that relationship depending on the person, is it at work, is it in their family life, in their love relationships? Um, because so many times people are like, "Oh, the connections are just surface level," and I always ask people, I'm like, "Well, what does that mean to you? Like, how do you connect with yourself?" Because that's um, really portrayed out in the world. I know for myself is like, I love deep connections, but behind the scenes, I'm trying to every day trying to peel a layer back and connect even deeper within myself. And it starts as the theme is with those four bodies is how deep we can connect with our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies, and that really radiates outward. So yeah, so I love that, Guru. That's the last question. Did you want to add anything, or
Hmm.
do you have any
Just
last thoughts? I think I just love this episode so much, especially day after Valentine's, self-love, love is in the air, and
oh,
how
I
we can love ourselves more, how we can love the world, how we can love others, unconditionally, and so any last thoughts?
yeah, I just like to say if there are people out there that have specific questions, can please just send them to us so that we can support you. And you know, and if you like what you're listening to, then share it with somebody and subscribe so that you can share it with people because you'll know when it when it comes and when it's being made. But other than that, I want to support as many people as I can. So if you have questions, specific questions, I want to be able to answer them. So send them to us, please. More than anything, we just want to be able to support you. So let us know what your questions are and we'll answer them in the next episode. How's that sound?
Love that and love everyone tuning in. Thank you all for supporting us and also supporting each other. And we're so excited that you guys tuned in. Like Guru said, share it with someone. We're here to serve. And Guru, thank you for your time. As always, fired up and just thankful and grateful to share the space with you.
I'm always grateful to have you here with me. And until next week, and if you're watching a recorded the recorded episode, then I'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. We love you.
Love you
Namaste.
guys. Take care.
Bye, everyone.